I never imagined that morning would be the last time I stood inside the sixth floor conference room, where the pale winter sunlight filtered through frosted glass and landed on the whiteboard still showing half-erased notes from the day before. No one spoke when I entered. Not a single greeting, not even the usual nod from Marcy in legal. Only Henry Whitaker, the new CEO, sat waiting behind the desk, his hand resting on a pale yellow folder. "Have a seat, Nicholas," he said, his voice light as foam. "We need to talk." I pulled out the chair gently, the leather of my shoes making a faint scratch against the polished wooden floor. After nearly 30 years with Coldridge Tech, the largest tech firm in the Seattle area, I had witnessed all kinds of emergency meetings, but never one where I was summoned alone on a Friday morning. "How long have you been with the company?" Henry asked, idly spinning a silver pen on the table. The question sounded more like the opening volley before an execution. "As of today, 28 years and 364 days, I answered without hesitation. Just one day left until my pension agreement would be fully vested. I had marked that day in red ink on my calendar a month ago. Henry nodded, though his eyes didn't leave the folder. "I'll be direct. Due to financial restructuring, we've had to eliminate some senior positions," he said, his tone as steady as a machine. "Unfortunately, your role is among them." It would have sounded reasonable if I hadn't just read the latest earnings report. Coldridge had posted the highest quarterly revenue in company history, nearly $300 million in just 3 months. There was nothing necessary about this cut. This was a calculated takedown. "I understand," I said quietly, voice low and expression blank. There was no point getting angry at a man who'd made up his mind before I even walked through the door. Henry slid the folder across to me. "This is your severance package. 3 months base salary, but you'll need to sign it by tomorrow, waiving all rights to any future claims." A trap. Smooth, clinical, and wrapped in sleek legal phrasing. I stared at the bold text on the cover page. Agreement to waive all legal action under any circumstance. It was a silencing tool. Henry smiled as if bestowing a gift. "We hope you'll consider this carefully. HR will escort you to clear out your belongings." I stood, took the folder, and didn't open it. "Thanks for the transparency," I said, letting the sarcasm drip from each word. He shrugged, saying nothing. On the way out, I caught Marcy's eyes quickly shift away. She knew. They all did, but no one said a word. As the elevator doors closed, I felt the floor under my feet tremble slightly. Not from the lift itself, but from something inside me cracking. In all those 28 years, I'd never taken more than 2 consecutive sick days. I stayed late, missed my son's birthday, even spent Thanksgiving alone at my desk to ensure the internal audit went smoothly. And now, I'd been discarded like an old file, irrelevant and expendable. A security guard escorted me back to my office, standing by as I packed a family photo, a 20-year service plaque, and the wristwatch Thomas gave me years ago into a cardboard box. I said nothing. Didn't cry. The pain was too deep. Silence was the only armor I had left. That afternoon, Seattle was gray and drizzly, rain tapping the windshield like sewing needles as I drove home. The familiar streets felt foreign, and I, a 62-year-old man just cut from a job he'd poured his life into, had nothing left but a box and a folder containing the final blow. But the story doesn't end there. I didn't sign, not out of pride, not out of rage, but because, deep down, I realized this had been planned long ago. A move carefully timed to eliminate me before my pension kicked in. I placed the folder on the dining table, sat beside a cup of coffee gone cold since morning. My mind spun, not from shock, but from years of scattered pieces now clicking into place. 3 years ago, I noticed quarterly expense reports had been edited after final approval. No one answered when I raised it. They brushed it off as post-review adjustments. 2 years ago, a phantom investment project kept receiving funds each quarter despite never existing on paper. And just recently, I stumbled upon internal notes between finance and legal about a priority advance routed through a shell company in Nevada, one no one had ever heard of. I wasn't an investigator, I was a technical process supervisor, the last stop before files went into official reports. But because I paid attention, even the smallest scratch never got past me. I walked into my small home office in Tacoma. Behind a wall-mounted painting was a built-in safe where I kept documents going back years. Anytime something felt off, but couldn't be questioned publicly, I made a copy, hand-noted the details, and locked it away. Call it instinct or self-preservation. I pulled out each file, dusted them off, and sorted them chronologically. Altered ledgers, chopped up meeting minutes, emails between the deputy CFO and anonymous investors referencing padded profit potential. Nearly 2,000 pages of evidence and a USB drive containing unfiltered originals. Looking at them gave me chills. They thought I'd be afraid, that I'd be old, tired, and just sign the paper, take my 3 months' pay, and fade quietly. They had misjudged. That night, I called someone from the past, Jackson Burke, former head of legal at Coldridge, now a partner at a law firm that specialized in corporate whistleblower cases. We hadn't spoken since he resigned over strategic differences with leadership. When I explained what I had, he paused for nearly 2 minutes. "You kept it all?" Jackson asked, his tone shifting. "Every page. You haven't signed anything." "Not a thing." "Then come to Seattle tomorrow. We've got work to do." The next morning, I drove nearly 2 hours to his office. Jackson was waiting, with a file folder in hand. "Welcome to the counterattack," he said. He walked me through the Whistleblower Protection Act and how to file with the SEC. I'd read about it before, but hearing it from someone who'd once been on the inside made it real and dangerous. "They didn't just fire you to save on pension," Jackson said, flipping through the first few documents. "They fired you because you're the only thing standing between them and a mountain of violations." We spent the entire day highlighting critical documents, encrypting sensitive files, and compiling a list of potential fraud infractions. I signed the official complaint to the SEC with full documentation as required. A few days later, I received my first call from the SEC's Western Regional Office. A calm female voice introduced herself as Linda Hawthorne from the Intake Division. "We've reviewed your preliminary submission. It's highly concerning, but before we move forward, we need to confirm a few details and verify your identity." "I understand. I've prepared everything." After the call, I stood at the window, where weak sunlight filtered through falling leaves. The exhaustion from being fired had given way to something sharper, like a blade freshly whetted after years of disuse. I wasn't seeking revenge. I didn't care for attention. But if they thought they could bury nearly 3 decades of work beneath one folder and a signature, they were about to be reminded, in detail, the way I've always seen everything, down to the last decimal. Jackson was a cautious man, but he was the one who suggested I make a call I never thought I'd need to. Paul Denvers. Paul had been the chief financial officer at Coldridge Tech nearly 8 years ago. He was known for his rigid integrity, the kind of man who rejected any figure that couldn't stand on 2 solid legs. After leaving Coldridge, he moved to the office of the Inspector General at the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. I still had his number from a special collaboration we once had. No one in the technical department understood financial regulations like I did, and no one on the finance team understood systems operations like Paul. After he transferred, we became little more than names in each other's old contact lists. But today, that name meant survival. I was sitting in my car, parked outside a cafe in Bellevue that had closed early. Rain tapped steadily against the windshield as if the sky itself was trying to keep quiet. I dialed the number. "Hello?" His voice was low and gravelly. "Paul, it's Nicholas Carter. I used to be with Coldridge, Internal Systems." A brief pause. "Nicholas? Good Lord, how long has it been?" 7 years. I gave a dry chuckle. "I need to talk. Urgently. About Coldridge." His voice turned serious immediately. "I'm listening." I laid it all out, getting terminated 3 days before my pension kicked in, the files I'd gathered over the last 4 years. I left nothing out. He didn't interrupt once. Only after I finished did he speak, slowly. "Nicholas, what you're describing, it's not just irregular. That's a clear violation of securities law. Systemic fraud, data manipulation, intentional employee removal to avoid financial obligations. Do you have Solid evidence? I've got physical files, digital copies, and cross-verified indexes. Good, very good. But you haven't signed anything with them, right? No signatures, no replies, haven't spoken to anyone at the company since it happened. He exhaled, like letting go of a weight he hadn't even started carrying. I'll arrange an internal session with the SEC's investigative team for Monday morning. Can you make it to the Olympia satellite office? I'll be there. Keep the documents somewhere absolutely secure. Don't email, don't upload, and don't use any unencrypted drives. And Nicholas, you should brace yourself. This could shake an entire system. I hung up not out of fear, but because that confirmation left no room for retreat. No more wondering if this was just an oversight. No more doubting whether I was overreacting. They had turned me into an obstacle. And now, I was the nail they couldn't pull out. That night, I sat alone on the balcony staring out at the black surface of the lake. My daughter Jenna FaceTimed from Chicago, where she was finishing her final year in medical school. I hadn't planned on telling her, but Jenna had a way of drawing things out of me. You look tired, Dad. Just a stressful week. Stressful, like being kicked out of your job 3 days before your pension? You think I don't read internal bulletins? I gave a strained smile, but Jenna tilted her head, voice more serious now. What are you going to do? I'm not signing anything. I'm meeting with the SEC on Monday. Well then, I'm proud of you. Those words stayed with me long after the call ended. Maybe it was her expression, not worry, but pride. Pride that I hadn't backed down. Sunday morning, I got up early and reviewed the documents one final time. I organized them into 3 folders, color-coded, one for myself, one to leave with Jackson in case something went wrong, and one for the meeting in Olympia. I encrypted them twice and stored them in a locked compartment under my car's trunk. Around noon, I received a message from an unknown number. We need confirmation of your intention to cooperate externally. Please respond before Monday. Coldridge, legal. I didn't answer. Instead, I dialed Paul again. Following Reddit. Then Monday, 9 a.m., Building B, 4th floor. The investigative team will be waiting. Thanks. We'll begin from there. I sat behind the wheel, started the engine, and listened to the soft hum. Rain ticked gently across the windshield like a drum roll for a new chapter. I drove off, leaving behind what I used to call safe. I was no longer just the man they terminated. I was the one carrying what they feared most: evidence and silence that couldn't be bought. Sunday afternoon, as I was reviewing backup files at my desk, the phone rang non-stop. 3 days of complete silence. Exactly what I'd expected had ended. Now, everything was different. The first call came from an internal extension. I didn't pick up. A message came through immediately. Nicholas, this is Marlene from HR. We need confirmation that you've received and signed the severance agreement. The support offer expires within 24 hours. Please respond immediately. Not long after, the phone buzzed again. A familiar male voice left a voicemail. Trying to sound calm, but clearly strained. Nicholas, this is Brian McAllister, head of legal at Coldridge. We want to ensure you understand the consequences of missing the deadline. The support package is not legally required. If you're hesitant for any reason, let us help clarify. Please return the call before the end of the day. I didn't respond. The silence now wasn't just a strategy, it was proof I was no longer within their grasp. That evening, as I was preparing the documents for my SEC session, the motion light outside the house flicked on. I peeked through the window and froze. It was Carter Vale, the CEO who had replaced Paul Denvers years ago, and the one who had signed my termination. He wore a gray coat, white shirt unbuttoned at the neck, holding a thick envelope, standing stiffly like someone who couldn't mask his unease. I didn't open the door. I stood quietly behind the curtain, watching. Carter knocked 3 times, then spoke loudly. Nick, I know you're in there. No one wants this to drag out. Signing the severance is the best option for both sides. I can walk you through the terms if you'd like. We don't want this going public. I remained silent, not a sound from inside. Eventually, he bent down, slid the envelope through the mail slot, then walked down the steps, glancing nervously around as if someone were watching. After he drove off, I picked up the envelope, a duplicate of the original agreement with a handwritten note attached. Final opportunity, sign by Monday, 9 a.m. After that, all offers are void. CV. The exact time of the SEC meeting. They were scared. There was no doubt anymore. They knew I was getting dangerously close to exposing something they couldn't defend with legal jargon. Somehow the information had leaked, or they had guessed I wasn't backing down. The next morning, the phone started ringing nonstop from 8 a.m. onward, 22 missed calls in less than an hour. HR, legal, unidentified numbers. I didn't answer a single one. It wasn't until a message from Jackson popped up that I touched the screen. SEC confirmed, the meeting is happening as scheduled. Be careful. Every move Coldridge is making now is damage control. They're panicking. I packed the documents carefully into a leather briefcase with a secure lock. The brown shoes I had polished the night before gleamed under the hallway light. A gray checkered shirt, a dark blue dotted tie, and my father's old wristwatch, the one I always wore when facing major turning points. Before leaving the house, I scribbled a note and stuck it to the living room mirror. When people fear the facts, they'll do anything to keep it buried. The drive to the SEC's regional office in Olympia took nearly 2 hours, but I didn't turn on the radio, didn't play a podcast, didn't need any sound. The silence wrapped around me like armor. Not to defend, but to focus. And in that silence, the details from the past years returned. Numbers altered without reason, warnings ignored, the way senior managers averted their eyes when I asked about irregular budgets. Now, they could call 100 times, bang on my door in the middle of the night, slide letters under the door like they were offering charity, but none of it mattered anymore. I didn't need their acknowledgement. I needed their accountability. When the SEC's glass building appeared at the end of the road, I gripped the steering wheel tighter, sat up straighter. Those who once thought they could hide behind spreadsheets and bank accounts were about to learn there are some people you simply cannot buy. Building B at the Olympia SEC office was intentionally stripped of any luxury. White walls, low ceilings, soft yellow lighting, not a single picture in sight. But stepping past the security glass, one thing was clear. This wasn't a place for casual meetings. This was where decisions got made that could shake entire financial ecosystem. Gregory Shaw, the lead investigator, greeted me in the lobby. Tall, salt and pepper hair, firm handshake, spoke only when necessary. Thanks for coming, Nicholas. Please come in. We walked into a closed-door conference room where 2 others were already waiting. Lila Voss, a lawyer specializing in whistleblower protection, and Andrew Klein, a legal analyst from the securities division. They stood when I entered, not out of formality, but to show respect. Mr. Carter, Lila began, this meeting is being recorded per procedure. If you agree, we'd like to begin with your statement. I nodded. No need for pleasantries. I opened the briefcase and pulled out 3 binders, each nearly 200 pages thick. Alongside them was an encrypted external hard drive. This is a full compilation of internal documents I've kept over the last 4 years. Altered financial reports, emails instructing staff to modify figures, unpublished budget drafts, and post-review files with shifted timestamps. I also have internal message transcripts from undocumented meetings. Gregory flipped through a few early pages, his eyes sharp as a blade. I need to emphasize, I stated, that I submitted multiple reports to senior management, but after Carter Vale became CEO, everything I sent was redirected to his office. From that point on, I received no responses. Andrew scanned the pages, then asked in a low voice, "Can you pinpoint when you first noticed major irregularities?" Second quarter of 2021, but suspicious patterns appeared even earlier. Lila interjected. Do you have reason to believe these manipulations were done to mislead investors? I don't just believe. I have proof. Here's an email between the current CFO and a major investor in Los Angeles discussing how to keep quarterly profits stable, even if actual numbers fall short. Gregory paused, looking directly at me. Do you understand this goes far beyond Coldridge's internal operations? I understand very clearly. We spent the next 3 hours reviewing each point, each date, every name mentioned. Andrew flagged sections for verification, while Lila ensured I understood my rights and protections under the SEC's whistleblower program. Finally, Gregory set down his pen and leaned back slightly in his chair. Based on what you've provided, he said, We have strong reason to believe Coldridge Tech overstated its revenue by at least 17 to 19% over the past 2 fiscal years. If accurate, this is a serious violation of federal securities law. We're launching a formal investigation, Lila added. Given the clarity of this evidence, we may begin within 48 hours. But we need you to keep your cooperation strictly confidential. I understand, I replied. Gregory turned to Andrew. Begin encrypted case documentation. Lila, notify the secondary investigation unit in D.C. I want this team working in tandem with an external financial audit group. Less than 30 minutes later, as I exited the building, everything around me felt different. Not heavier, not more intimidating, just focused. What I handed over today wasn't just about reclaiming the dignity of a man discarded so easily, but about ending a rotting structure masquerading as success. As I started my car, a message pinged from an unknown number. What did you just do, Nicholas? If you bring this into the light, we all lose. No name, no signature, but I knew. Someone from the board was starting to feel the cracks in their armor. I didn't reply. I deleted the message. I drove out of Olympia as the western sky began to brighten. The silence now wasn't loneliness. It was the sound of something they couldn't stop. The fact, officially placed in the hands of those who could force them to face it. On Wednesday morning, while making coffee in the kitchen, the phone rang, internal number. I was about to ignore it when the name popped up, Janet Lemoyne, VP of Human Resources at Coldridge. I let it ring through. Moments later, voicemail. Nicholas, something's happening. The board just called an emergency meeting. Vale hasn't been in his office since early this morning. There's a rumor SEC contacted our legal counsel directly. I don't know what's going on, but everyone's panicking. I set the phone down and stared at the now cold coffee. Instinct told me the first domino had fallen. The door had been opened and the storm was tearing through Coldridge's walls. By noon, another message arrived, this time from someone I never expected. Richard Beaumont, chairman of the board. Nicholas, we would like to request a direct conversation. Could we arrange a meeting tomorrow at headquarters? Your presence is of great importance. Attached was an official invitation, written in unusually respectful language. No corporate stiffness, just veiled pleading wrapped in diplomacy. I forwarded the message to Jackson. He called back minutes later. Don't respond, not directly, we'll go. With your lawyer present, they're trying to contain the fallout before it spirals. That night, I received an email from a company address I didn't recognize. Subject, Proposal for Cooperation, Internal Resolution. They offered to reinstate all my benefits, including pension, and proposed a long-term strategic advisory role after retirement. The final paragraph read, We trust in Mr. Carter's loyalty and deep understanding. We hope to navigate this sensitive period together to avoid unnecessary harm to both sides. I didn't reply. But the next morning, as scheduled, Jackson and I arrived at the company office, where I had worked for nearly 3 decades. The security guard who once escorted me out gave a hesitant nod as I passed. His eyes flickered between confusion and recognition. 17th floor, the board's main conference room. The atmosphere was dense, like the room had just absorbed an argument. Richard Beaumont sat at the head of the table, flanked by 3 other board members. One chair sat empty. Vales. Thank you for coming, Nicholas, Richard began, voice low, slow, and carefully measured. We sincerely want to hear you out. The materials from the SEC were surprising. Jackson cut in before I could respond. My client attempted to resolve this internally for years. He sent reports, issued warnings, requested meetings. No one here responded appropriately. One of the board members winced. We don't deny that, Richard said. And as of this morning, Carter Vale has been officially suspended. An independent internal investigation has been initiated. Additionally, we want to confirm that all of Mr. Nicholas Carter's benefits, including retirement, healthcare, and seniority status, are fully restored. I looked him straight in the eye. I didn't come here for benefits. I came to ensure what they wanted to erase doesn't stay buried. Richard nodded slightly, as if he'd anticipated that response. We understand, but we also hope you'll consider returning as an advisor. to help rebuild our internal controls, reinforce a culture of transparency. I paused before answering. I'll speak to the SEC investigators. I'll provide everything I have. If what I present helps with your restructuring, that's fine, but I won't work in the shadows anymore. Jackson stood up. This meeting ends here. Any further discussions will require SEC representation. We walked out of the room. No one stood to see us off. As we passed the glass hallway, I noticed a few former coworkers bow their heads. Some avoided eye contact, others just stood silently. On the lobby's TV screen, a financial news ticker rolled across. SEC launches formal investigation into Coldridge Tech, CEO suspended, board calls emergency session. On the ride back, Jackson spoke quietly. They thought they could control you with a few apologies and a paycheck. What shook them was realizing you didn't need either. I looked out the window. Seattle was as damp and cold as any other spring, but the chill no longer cut through me like the day I was escorted out of that office. 3 days after the board meeting, I got a call from Lila Voss, the SEC's whistleblower protection officer. "We need to meet as soon as possible," she said. "New findings have changed the scope of the investigation." The meeting was scheduled for the following morning, this time at the SEC's Special Operations Branch in Tacoma. When I arrived, the atmosphere was different. No longer the formal courtesy of early sessions, but the focused intensity of people who realized the case was far bigger than anticipated. Gregory opened. "We've gained access to Coldridge's internal archives going back to 2016. What Carter Vale did was just the surface. The real issue started under Brian Huxley's tenure as CFO. I nodded. That name had come up in closed-door meetings I was never allowed into, always mentioned with hesitation. Now, those uneasy signals were beginning to make sense. "It's not just about inflating revenue," Lila added. "We found investment advances routed through at least 3 shell companies controlled by relatives of a board member. The company named Greenmont Holdings, owned by Anna Stratton, the former executive chairman's daughter." Gregory slid an email printout toward me. I glanced at it and immediately recognized the contents. It was part of a document set I had backed up and locked away at the bank 3 years ago, an internal thread between Huxley and Anna Stratton discussing ways to clean up the revenue expense sheet ahead of the audit cycle. "This matches what I have stored at the bank," I confirmed. "I'll retrieve the original copies today." That afternoon, I arrived at Federal Trust Bank on Jefferson Avenue. In a small room for accessing safety deposit boxes, I opened my vault and pulled out a thick envelope marked in red. Q4 2018. Confidential, Stratton thread. Pre-printed email threads, handwritten notes summarizing content, cross-referenced transaction logs. I had prepared everything years ago, not out of paranoia, but from a gut sense that something wasn't right. When I handed the files over to SEC, both Gregory and Lila went quiet for a moment. "This isn't just about Carter Vale anymore," Lila said in a low voice. "We're seeing a structured, systemic fraud pattern spanning multiple executive regimes." That weekend, the SEC issued subpoenas for 4 former board members, including Richard Beaumont. 2 resigned immediately. The other 2 were suspended pending investigation. Coldridge Tech simultaneously announced the termination of Carter Vale for gross ethical misconduct. The media exploded. Coldridge Tech, largest financial investigation in the Pacific Northwest in a decade. Systemic fraud uncovered, Coldridge leadership under scrutiny. My name didn't appear in the headlines, but in detailed coverage, analysts began referencing a longtime employee who preserved critical evidence over several years. That night, I got a call from Elizabeth, my daughter, in Chicago. "Dad, you're at the center of a national firestorm," she said, part amazed, part proud. "Someone in my class sent me the article and asked if Mr. Carter was my dad." I chuckled. "I never wanted to be famous like this." "But you didn't stay silent. That's what I admire most." I didn't answer right away, partly because I was moved, partly because I knew this wasn't over yet. The following Monday, I went to Jackson's office to prepare for our next SEC session. As I walked in, he handed me a fax. "Just came in from the company," he said. "Internal board memo. Some of the new members are proposing to bring you back as an independent oversight advisor for the restructuring process." I skimmed the memo. No apology, no admission of wrongdoing, just neutral language and a list of suggested incentives. I looked at Jackson. They still don't get it. He nodded. They think offering you a title makes you their mascot. I folded the paper and tucked it into my jacket. I'm not here to be anyone's symbol, I said. I'm here to make sure no one hides behind quarterly reports again. 1 week after the board resignations and CNBC's confirmation that Coldridge Tech was now under formal federal investigation, a sealed envelope arrived at Jackson's office. Inside was a full reinstatement document, my role restored, all retirement benefits returned, and an appendix offering a settlement package equal to 5 years of base salary plus lifetime healthcare coverage. I read it line by line, not from doubt, but from a habit I had never broken. No vague clauses, no gag orders. This was a calculated surrender. They knew they had crossed a legal boundary and were now trying to patch what was left. Jackson watched as I folded the document. They think this ends it, he said. But we both know, for you, this is just where it begins. That same day, I received an email from Patricia Rourke, the newly appointed CEO, brought in to replace Vail. We're hoping to work with you again, Mr. Carter, this time as our internal ethics and transparency advisor. We're building a completely new division, and no one is better suited to lead it than you. I didn't reject the offer, but I didn't accept it either. For decades of service, I'd watched layers of ethical language get painted over rot, codes of conduct posted in break rooms, slogans pasted on every hallway, while the real decisions happened in rooms where no one was allowed to record. I sent a short reply. I appreciate the invitation, however, I've agreed to work with the SEC in helping develop whistleblower protection policies in the tech sector. That will be my focus for now. Patricia responded in under an hour. We understand and respect your decision. If there's ever an opportunity to collaborate in the future, our doors are open. By now, the media no longer called me an anonymous insider. They used my full name, my photo. One financial journal even called me Coldridge's last guardian of the truth. It sounded grand, but I didn't feel pride, just regret. Because that recognition should have come from within the company, not from public pressure. Meanwhile, Coldridge's stock nosedived. Within 2 weeks, it dropped nearly 30%, prompting mass investor withdrawals. Tech publications flagged Coldridge as high risk, while multiple business partners froze or paused collaboration pending credibility reassessment. I didn't celebrate, I didn't gloat. No one who's loved their work for nearly a lifetime feels joy watching it collapse under the weight of everything they tried to prevent. But the truth was, if they wouldn't change from within, external pressure would force them to face themselves. The following month, I received a letter from the Federal Financial Security Office inviting me to join a task force focused on developing whistleblower response protocols in the tech sector. I accepted. I arrived in Washington, D.C. at the start of summer. The small apartment I rented near Capitol Hill had a balcony overlooking a park. There, I spent time documenting the full timeline, from the day I was terminated to the start of the investigation, not for publication, but as training material for the Witness Protection Initiative. On weekends, I called Elizabeth. My grandson had just started walking. Jenna sent a video of him toddling around the backyard, holding the toy airplane I gave him for his first birthday. I no longer felt the weight of a decaying system on my shoulders. One Saturday afternoon, I received an email with no subject line and a PDF attachment. The sender, cval@c-techgroup.net. I opened it. Inside was a single line. You won, but I won't forget how much you destroyed. I deleted the message, no reply. This was never about winning or losing, it was about right and wrong. I sat down at my desk, powered up my laptop, and typed the first line of the new policy framework. No silence is worth more than the truth. 6 months after I handed over the final set of documents to the SEC, the federal court in Seattle officially opened proceedings against the 3 primary defendants in the Coldridge Tech financial fraud case. David Vail sat at the defense table, gaunt, hollow-eyed. Beside him were Anna Stratton and Paul Huxley, once hailed as the strategic minds behind the company. Now, all 3 wore dark suits, stripped of the confidence that once allowed them to manipulate numbers and steer boardrooms like executive illusionists. I didn't attend the first day of the trial, not because I was avoiding it, but because I didn't need to witness an outcome I'd seen coming the moment I stepped into the SEC office in Olympia. But Jackson was there. He called me right after he left court. They pled guilty, Nick, he said, voice heavy but firm. All three. The court agreed to a lighter sentence for Anna due to her cooperation, but David and Paul are facing at least 8 years in federal prison. I sat still for a while, looking out at the backyard, where Jenna was playing with the kids. The late autumn sunlight glowed on Lucas's blonde hair, my oldest grandson. And I was taken back to the moment I first walked into Coldridge 30 years ago, believing that integrity was the foundation of any honest system. News of the trial spread across every financial outlet. Most articles referred to me as the resilient whistleblower, the one who stayed silent for years, but when he spoke, the entire tech industry had to listen. The SEC later awarded me a federal whistleblower bonus, 1% of the total fines Coldridge was ordered to pay. It was more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. But what mattered to me wasn't sitting in a bank account. A few weeks later, I launched the Nicholas Carter Ethics Fund, a scholarship dedicated to students pursuing degrees in auditing, compliance, and risk management in the tech field. The fund's goal was to support seniors with financial need who maintained top academic standing and showed a strong commitment to corporate transparency. I used my SEC bonus and a majority of the Coldridge settlement to seed the fund. Just like I had once backed up files and locked them in a safe, I poured that same discipline into creating opportunities for the next generation. The scholarship's launch event was held at Oregon State University, where I had studied nearly 40 years earlier. Elizabeth and my 2 grandkids sat in the front row. As I stepped up to speak, the room fell silent, as if waiting for something unspoken from the past. Not pain, but closure. "I'm not a brave man," I began, scanning the quiet faces of students. "I'm just someone who held on to things others wanted to forget. A number, an email, a question no one wanted to answer. But when those fragments come together, they form something no one can ignore: the truth." There was no roaring applause. None was needed. That silence was the deepest form of respect I had ever received. That evening, Elizabeth sat beside me on the balcony. She looked at me for a long time, then whispered, "You lived up to what you always taught me growing up. Don't stay silent just because everyone else is doing the wrong thing." I turned and met her eyes, not the eyes of a little girl needing protection, but of a woman who understood the value of what's hardest to hold on to: principle, honesty, and unwavering resolve when the world turns its back. Coldridge Tech still existed, but it was no longer the untouchable giant. The company underwent full restructuring, sold off 2 branches, and remained under continuous oversight from independent agencies for at least 5 years. Quarterly reports were now audited by 3 separate firms. Those might be seen as successes, but to me, the real victory was elsewhere. Many former colleagues reached out privately. Some apologized for their silence. Others shared that they had seen irregularities but lacked the courage to speak up. I didn't blame them. No one walks into a storm without believing there's light on the other side. I had been forced out of the company I gave most of my life to, but when I left, I carried with me the one thing that couldn't be taken: the reality they tried to bury. And you can't fire that. From a veteran employee fired just before retirement, Nicholas Carter became a symbol of integrity in the American tech industry. His courage didn't just expose the fraud at Coldridge Tech, it sparked nationwide reform in how whistleblowers are protected. He turned down lucrative offers and chose to build a scholarship fund and collaborate with the SEC to defend those who dare to speak up. His story stands as a powerful reminder. Silence can be bought, but conscience cannot. What do you think about Nicholas's journey and the brave choice he made? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, real-life stories about family and resilience.